definitely didn't know anything about this battle. In the middle of the 13th century, the fragments of the once great Byzantine Empire were fighting desperately for survival. After the Crusaders captured and plundered Constantinople in 1204, several successor states arose from the ruins of the Orthodox world. Each of them considered itself the true successor to the Roman emperors and dreamed of regaining the capital. A powerful coalition formed against one of these states, the Empire of Nicaea. It seemed that the best knights of Europe, united with Greek separatists, would wipe the Nicene Empire off the face of the earth. But history decided otherwise, turning the expected massacre into one of the most ingenious and bloodless victories in history. This story is not about the clang of swords, but about the power of words, cunning, and psychology. It is a story about how the Byzantines forced their enemies to destroy themselves on the field of Pelagonia. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one quarrel at the dinner table decided the fate of an entire empire. What if I told you that the greatest victories are won not with swords, but with words? To understand the events of 1259, we need to look back to the moment when a unified Byzantium ceased to exist. In its place, three main centers of power emerged, three fragments of the imperial eagle. The strongest and most ambitious of these was the Empire of Nicaea, located in Asia Minor. Its rulers, the Palaiologos dynasty, considered themselves the legitimate emperors in exile. Their main and only goal was to return to Constantinople. In the west, in the Balkans, was their main Greek rival, the Despotate of Epirus. Its rulers, the Komnenos dukes, also claimed the Byzantine throne. They considered the Nicene rulers to be upstarts and were ready to do anything to be the first to enter the holy city. The third player was the Latins, European knights who had established their states on conquered lands. The key among them was the Principality of Achaia in the Peloponnese. It was ruled by the valiant and famous knight Guillaume II de Villehardouin. Thus, the political map of the region resembled a complex chessboard. The Nicene, Epirote, and Latin factions were constantly at war and forming alliances against each other. It was a ruthless game in which everyone pursued their own goals. The Nicaean emperor, Michael VIII Palaiologos, was a master of this game. He understood that brute force was not always the key to victory. Diplomacy, espionage, and the ability to find his enemies' weaknesses were his main weapons. The despot of Epirus, Michael II. Komnenos Doukas, on the other hand, was a proud and ambitious man. He trusted no one and believed that only military power could secure his throne. This pride became his Achilles' heel. The Latin knights, in turn, brought their feudal traditions to Greece. They valued honor, valor in battle, and loyalty to their lord. However, they found it difficult to understand the subtle and confusing Byzantine politics. It was on this clash of worldviews that the entire Nicaea strategy would be built. Michael VIII decided not only to defeat his enemies, but to make them believe in their own defeat. This was a task for a genius of intrigue. What do you think is more important for victory, a strong army or cunning diplomacy? Share your opinion in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Are you ready to learn the bitter truth about a grand military alliance that was doomed to failure from the start due to internal contradictions? By the critical year of 1259, the impressive military successes of the resurgent Empire of Nicaea had become so obvious and threatening to all its neighbors that its numerous enemies finally realized they must act immediately and jointly, combining their forces or be destroyed one by one. Thus was born one of the most powerful and ambitious military alliances of that time in the history of Latin Romania, aimed at the complete and final destruction of the Nicaean threat to the Byzantine revival. This was the last attempt by the Latins to stop the inevitable, the restoration of Byzantium by the exiles from Nicaea, and they gathered everything they could for a decisive blow, which became their last hope for preserving the conquests of 1204. The initiator and architect of this ambitious alliance was the proud and ambitious despot of Epirus, Michael II Komnenos Doukas. He soberly understood from the experience of defeat that alone he could not physically cope with the ever-growing military power of the Nicene under the leadership of Palaiologos. He desperately needed powerful allies with armies and resources, and he purposefully found them in the west among the Latin states of Greece. Michael was a pragmatist, ready to sacrifice Greek pride and ally himself with the hated Latin crusaders for the sake of survival and his ambition to occupy the throne of Constantinople. The end justified the means, and he did not hesitate to ally himself with those whom the Greeks considered invaders and heretics, proving that politics knows no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. The influential Achaean prince Guillaume II de Villehardouin, ruler of the Principality of Achaea in the Peloponnese, became a key strategic figure in the alliance. He was one of the most respected military leaders and powerful rulers in all of Latin Greece, controlling the richest lands. To strengthen the alliance with dynastic ties, Michael II strategically married his eldest daughter, Anna Komnene Doukaina, to him, thus becoming related to the Latins. The marriage was not one of love, but of politics, an exchange of a woman for an army, typical feudal diplomacy, where daughters were bargaining chips for alliances, and Michael used his daughters as instruments of foreign policy without sentimentality, which was the norm of the era, where personal happiness was insignificant compared to state interests. Through another calculated dynastic marriage, the powerful King Manfred of Sicily, the illegitimate but talented son of Emperor Frederick II, joined the powerful coalition. He married another daughter of Michael II, the beautiful Helena Komnene Doukaina, and received important strategic cities on the coast of Epirus, Dyrrhachium, Avalon, and Corfu as a generous dowry. In exchange for the territories, he sent his father-in-law an elite detachment of 400 heavily armed Teutonic knights, professional killers in plate armor, to provide military assistance. These were the best warriors in Europe, hardened in the Crusades, and their presence dramatically changed the balance of power. 400 knights were worth 4,000 ordinary soldiers in terms of striking power, giving the coalition an advantage in quality that was supposed to compensate for any numerical superiority of the Nicene forces. Thus, the combined army of the Allies was truly impressive and diverse in composition. It consisted of Epirus Greeks-Romans, Frankish knights from Achaea, German Teutonic knights from Sicily, and Italian mercenaries, as well as a multitude of mercenaries of various tribes from all over Europe. In terms of total numbers and quality of armament, plate armor versus chain mail, it significantly, perhaps twice, surpassed anything that the Empire of Nicaea, with its limited resources, could urgently field. On paper, it was an invincible force, a combination of Greek cunning, Latin heavy cavalry, and German discipline that was supposed to crush any enemy in one blow, and the Allies were confident of an easy victory, already dividing up future trophies and lands before the campaign began. Each of the influential participants in this fragile alliance selfishly pursued their own personal goals rather than common ones. Michael II dreamed of finally defeating the hated Nicene Greeks and triumphantly taking the imperial throne in Constantinople himself as the legitimate heir of the Komnenos dynasty. Guillaume de Villehardouin wanted to militarily crush the last strong Greek player in the Balkans and ensure the hegemony of the Latin Crusaders in the region forever, completing the conquest begun by their fathers in 1204. Each saw himself as the main beneficiary of victory and his allies as temporary tools for achieving his goals, which undermined the foundation of the alliance. It is impossible to fight effectively together when everyone is pulling the blanket over themselves and does not trust the other, fearing to be deceived after victory. Manfred of Sicily, ambitious in turn, strategically sought to expand his political influence in the Balkans and create a Mediterranean empire. The knights he sent were only the vanguard of his future large-scale conquests in the region. The alliance was formally sealed with solemn oaths on the Bible and dynastic marriages. but its fragile foundation was built on the shifting sands of mutual distrust, suspicion, and hidden contempt. It was a marriage of convenience without love, and all participants knew that it would last exactly until victory, after which the squabbling over the spoils and a new war would begin. But now, between former allies, the typical fate of coalitions based not on shared values, but on temporary interests against a common enemy. Michael's Epirota Greeks did not trust the Latin Franks and Germans, whom they considered arrogant invaders and heretical Catholics. The Latins, in turn, looked down on the Greeks with contempt, considering them cunning schemers, pampered and unreliable allies capable of betraying them at a critical moment. Each secretly hoped to deceive the other in the division of spoils and lands, preparing backup plans for betrayal. Nicaea's intelligence service, the logothete of the Dromos, was well aware of all these internal contradictions and cracks in the alliance through spies and defectors. Emperor Michael VIII Palaiologos, a brilliant strategist, understood deeply that the main fatal weakness of his numerically superior enemies lay not in the quality of their armor or the sharpness of their swords, but in their minds, mistrust, pride, and disunity. It was precisely this psychological crack of mistrust that he coolly decided to use to deliver his main crushing blow of division, rather than a frontal attack on the strongest point, heavy cavalry. Palaiologos was a master of psychological warfare, understanding that victory is achieved not only with the sword, but also with the mind, capable of sowing panic and chaos in the enemy's ranks with one precise strike at the right moment, turning the enemy's strength into weakness through his own fears and suspicions. But what if Nicaea's main secret weapon in the upcoming battle was not the size or quality of its army, but the unique personality of the charismatic man who led it, its commander? In the next intriguing chapter, we will reveal the secret of the biography and talent of the legendary Nicene commander who will turn the tide of the campaign. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret: how one man, not being the emperor, changed the course of history. When Michael VIII learned of the formation of an enemy coalition, he found himself in a difficult position. His best troops were busy on other fronts. He had to assemble an army from whatever was at hand. It consisted of Nicaean soldiers, as well as mercenaries, Polovtsians, Turks, and Hungarians. In terms of numbers, it was significantly inferior to the combined forces of the enemy. The emperor did not place himself at the head of this motley army, but his younger brother, the Sebastocrator John Palaiologos. This choice was not accidental. John was not just a member of the imperial family, he was the most talented commander in Nicaea. He combined qualities rarely found in one person. He was a brave warrior, but at the same time a calculating and cunning strategist. Unlike European knights, he believed that victory achieved by intellect was more valuable than victory achieved by the sword. John thoroughly studied his opponents. He knew about the pride and hot-temperedness of Michael II of Epirus. He knew about the knightly straightforwardness and somewhat overconfident nature of Guillaume de Villehardouin. He understood that engaging in open battle with superior enemy forces would be suicide. His only chance was to destroy the enemy alliance from within. The plan he devised was bold and risky, but ingenious in its simplicity. He decided not to fight the army, but its leaders. His weapons would be rumors, misinformation, and psychological pressure. He intended to play on their ambitions, fears, and mutual distrust. John Palaiologos was a true heir to the Byzantine traditions of warfare. He remembered the teachings of ancient strategists who taught that the best battle was the one that was avoided. His goal was not to destroy the enemy army, but to force it to disperse without a fight. The entire subsequent campaign became a one-man show, in which John was both the director and the main performer. He led his army not into battle, but into a performance, the finale of which he had already written. This campaign was to be his masterpiece, the pinnacle of Byzantine military art. He had to prove that intelligence and cunning could overcome any force, even the most powerful. Guess what happened next when two powerful armies met in the same valley? Upon receiving his orders, John Palaiologos swiftly led his army to the Balkans. His march was so rapid that it took his allies by surprise. He moved along bypass routes, avoiding major clashes. His goal was not territory, but the enemy army itself. He knew that sooner or later he would have to face it head-on. Upon learning of the invasion, the Allies gathered all their forces and moved to meet the Nicene army. They were confident of victory. Their army was larger, better armed, and consisted of renowned warriors. The two armies met on the wide plain of Pelagonia in northern Greece. This place was ideal for a large battle. There were no narrow gorges or dense forests where an ambush could be set up. The opponents set up camp a few kilometers apart. There was a lull before the storm. Both sides were preparing for the decisive battle that would determine the fate of Byzantium. The mood in the Allies' camp was buoyant. Guillaume de Villehardouin, addressing his knights, said that the battle would be a walk in the park. He was confident that the mere sight of his steel-clad cavalry would put the Nicene forces to flight. In the Nicaea camp, on the contrary, all was quiet and calm. John Palaiologos did not make any loud speeches. He ordered his soldiers to rest and prepare, but his main plan was already in motion. He sent his light cavalry mercenaries, Polovtsians and Turks, ahead. Their task was not to engage in battle, but to constantly harass the enemy. They circled around the Allies' camp, showering them with arrows and giving them no peace. This tactic wore down the knights. They were forced to remain in their armor under the scorching sun. But the main effect was psychological. The Nicene forces demonstrated that they were not afraid and were ready to impose their rules of the game. The tension grew with each passing hour. Battle seemed inevitable. But John was in no hurry to give the order to attack. He was waiting for the right moment. What was the Nicenes' first move in this deadly chess game? In the next chapter, you will learn how the game of nerves began. John Palaiologos' plan began to take shape as soon as the armies took up their positions. He did not attack the enemy camp. Instead, he began to attack the minds of its commanders. Nicaean agents and spies, who had infiltrated the Epirus despot's entourage in advance, began their work. They spread rumors, playing on old grudges and suspicions. Every word was carefully calibrated poison. The Epirotes were whispered that the Latins actually despised them. They were told that after the victory, Guillaume de Villehardouin would take all the conquered lands for himself, leaving Michael II with only empty promises. This fell on fertile ground, as the Epirotes already disliked the arrogant Franks. At the same time, John began secret negotiations with Michael II himself. He sent him letters in which he appealed to their common Greek heritage. He convinced the despot that their enmity was a mistake that only benefited the Latin invaders. He offered Michael II to abandon his allies in exchange for guarantees of security and a favorable peace. He did not demand surrender, but offered an honorable way out of the situation. It was an offer that was difficult to refuse. A key role in this drama was played by Michael II's illegitimate son, John Ducas, nicknamed the Bastard. He was a brave warrior, but his origins made him vulnerable to insults, and the Latins gave him reason to be insulted. During one of the military councils, Guillaume de Villehardouin publicly insulted John the Bastard, questioning his loyalty. This was a huge mistake. Deeply offended, John the Bastard convinced his father that the Latins could not be trusted. Thus, John Palaiologos wove a complex web of intrigue. He used all means available: flattery, threats, false promises, and old grudges. He did not try to break up the alliance, he merely pushed it toward self-destruction. Instead of preparing for battle, the leaders of the coalition began to view each other with suspicion. The unity that had seemed so strong began to crack at the seams. All that remained was to deliver the final decisive blow. John Palaiologos was patient. He knew that the fruit had to ripen. He waited until the seeds of discord he had sown sprouted their poisonous shoots. What if I showed you how one careless word could destroy an entire army? The climax came on the night before the decisive battle. The last council of war was held in the coalition leader's tent, which turned into a loud quarrel. The cause was a minor disagreement over tactics. However, behind it lay a deep mutual distrust. Guillaume de Villehardouin, as the most experienced commander, demanded complete obedience to his orders. Michael II of Epirus, who considered himself the leader of the alliance, took this as a personal insult. The quarrel quickly escalated into mutual accusations. Old grudges and suspicions came to the surface. The last straw was a repeated insult to Michael II's son, John Bastard. After that, the humiliated and enraged despot of Epirus made his final decision. He realized that the warnings from Nicaea were true. Returning to his tent, he ordered his army to secretly leave the camp. Under cover of night, the entire Epirote army, which made up almost half of the Allied army, quietly abandoned its positions. Michael II and his sons fled, leaving their allies to their fate. This was not just a retreat, it was treason. The Epirotes did not simply leave. They did not even warn the Latins of their decision. They left them alone with an enemy ready for battle. At dawn, the Latin and Sicilian camp woke up to a shocking sight. Where their allies' tents had stood just yesterday, there was now only an empty field. Panic and confusion gripped the army. They were now outnumbered. Their morale was shattered. They felt betrayed and abandoned. John Palaiologos, watching all this from his post, realized that his plan had worked perfectly. He had not shed a drop of blood, but had already won half the battle. The enemy coalition had ceased to exist. Now he faced a demoralized and weakened enemy. The hour of the decisive blow had come. The psychological war had been won, and it was time for the real battle. What did the Latin knights do, finding themselves outnumbered by an enemy ready for battle? In the next chapter, we will see how pride led them to disaster. Despite the betrayal of his allies and his numerical inferiority, Guillaume de Villehardouin decided to accept battle. As a true knight, he considered retreat to be a disgrace. He believed that the power of his heavy cavalry would be enough to crush the Nicene forces. He lined up his warriors in battle formation. In the center stood the select Teutonic knights of King Manfred. On the flanks were the Achaean nobility and other Latin barons. Seeing this, John Palaiologos employed classic Byzantine tactics against heavy cavalry. He did not line up his infantry in a dense line for a frontal assault. Instead, he relied on mobility and long-range weapons. He divided his army into three parts. He placed his best warriors, light-mounted archers, Polovtsians, and Turks, on the flanks. In the center, he placed Hungarian crossbowmen and Nicaean infantry. The battle was started not by knights, but by mounted archers. They swooped down on the flanks of the Latin army, showering them with a hail of arrows. They did not engage in close combat, but kept their distance, wearing down the enemy. The heavily armed knights could not catch up with the swift nomads. Every attempt to counterattack turned into a futile chase. The archers' arrows found gaps in the armor, incapacitating horses and causing confusion in the ranks. Seeing that his army was suffering losses without being able to respond, Guillaume de Villehardouin gave the order for a general attack. This was exactly what John Palaiologos had been waiting for. An avalanche of steel-clad horsemen rushed towards the Nicaean center. But the Nicene army did not engage in battle. Hungarian crossbowmen fired several volleys, and then the infantry parted, allowing the knights to pass through their ranks. The attack, meeting no resistance, lost its momentum and faltered. At that moment, the mounted archers entered the fray again. They struck the knights, who were bogged down and had lost their formation, from the flanks and rear. The Latin army found itself surrounded, under crossfire from all sides. The formation was completely broken. What had begun as an organized attack turned into a chaotic retreat. The battle, which had never really begun, was lost. The defeat of the Latin army was complete. Having lost their formation and command, the knights fled. The Nicaean light cavalry pursued them, preventing them from regrouping. Many noble barons and knights were taken prisoner. Among them was the commander of the Teutonic contingent. However, John Palaiologos' main target was the leader of the entire coalition, the Achaean prince Guillaume II de Villehardouin. Realizing that the battle was lost, the prince tried to escape. In the confusion, he separated from his men and fled the battlefield alone. He hoped to reach his estates and gather a new army. He discarded his knight's armor and spurs so that he would not be recognized. Changing into simple clothes, he hid in a haystack near the town of Castoria. There he hoped to wait until the pursuit had passed. However, Nicaean patrols combed the entire area in search of fugitives. One of the detachments discovered the hidden prince. He was betrayed by his family teeth, which were well known from descriptions. The capture of Guillaume de Villehardouin was the crowning glory of the victory at Pelagonia. The Nicaean forces had captured not just a noble prisoner, they had captured the most powerful and influential Latin ruler in Greece. Along with him, almost all the barons of the Principality of Achaea were taken prisoner. This meant that the strongest crusader state in the Peloponnese was left without a leader. It no longer had a leader or an army. The news quickly spread throughout the region. It had a stunning effect. No one could believe that the renowned Achaean army, considered invincible, had been so easily and quickly defeated. For John Palaiologos, it was a triumph. He had not simply won a battle, he had captured the enemy king, ending the chess game with a brilliant checkmate. The consequences of the Battle of Pelagonia were swift and stunning. The Nicene army, encountering no further resistance, launched a rapid offensive against the possessions of its enemies. The strategic initiative passed entirely into their hands. The first target was the Despotate of Epirus, whose ruler had fled the battlefield in disgrace. The Nicene troops entered Epirus and easily captured its capital, the city of Arta. Despot Michael II was forced to flee to the Ionian Islands. Thus, Nicaea's main Greek rival was taken out of the game. The dream of the Epirus rulers to take the throne of Constantinople was buried forever. Most of their possessions came under the control of the Nicene Empire. John Palaiologos then turned his attention southward to the Latin possessions. He invaded the Duchy of Thebes and forced its ruler to recognize the authority of the Emperor of Nicaea. All of central Greece came under the control of Nicaea. The crushing victory at Pelagonia in September 1259 was the golden key that finally opened the long-awaited gates of Constantinople, Tsargrad, to the exhausted empire of Nicaea. Although the sacred capital was not physically returned until 2 years later, in August 1261, it was the fateful events of 1259 that inevitably made this triumphant return possible and predestined. The defeat of the powerful Western coalition in one fell swoop completely eliminated the main military threat from the West, the Latins, who could no longer prevent the Byzantine revenge. Without Pelagonia, there would have been no liberation of Constantinople. Cause and effect were inseparable, and contemporaries understood that the real war for the capital had been won not at the city walls, but on a distant field in Macedonia 2 years earlier, where the fate of empires was decided in a single day and a single battle. Emperor Michael VIII, Palaiologos could now strategically focus all his limited military forces and resources on carefully preparing for the decisive campaign against Constantinople without distractions. He no longer had to constantly fear a treacherous blow from behind from the defeated Epirotes or captured Achaeans. They had been neutralized. His rear was safely secured for the first time in decades, allowing him to risk everything on one card: the storming of the capital. A secure rear is half the battle in war, because an army fearing attack from behind cannot fully concentrate on the enemy in front, always looking back and dividing its forces, while Michael had the luxury of concentrating all his forces on a single goal without fear, which was critical to the success of the risky undertaking of taking the fortified capital by sea and land. The capture of the powerful Guillaume de Villehardouin in battle gave the astute Michael VIII a powerful diplomatic trump card in negotiations, a living hostage of immense value. After several agonizing years of humiliating captivity in a Nicaean prison, the Achaean prince was morally broken and forced to accept an extremely humiliating peace on the victor's terms. In exchange for his personal freedom and life, he was forced to give the Nicene Greeks several important strategic fortresses in the south of the Peloponnese, the heart of his domain. It was a predatory ransom, but the alternative was death in prison or life imprisonment. So Guillaume chose dishonor and freedom over honor and death, which the Latins never forgave him for, considering him a traitor to the interests of the Franks for the sake of his own skin. Among these transferred fortresses were the impregnable Monemvasia on the rock, Mistrust at the foot of Taygetus, and Mina in the mountains, key fortifications. They immediately became the first reliable bridgehead for the Byzantines in the Morea, the Peloponnese, the heart of the Latin possessions in Greece, from where they could advance. From this turning point in 1262, the Byzantines began a slow but steady reconquest of the entire Peloponnese, fortress by fortress, over the following decades. Mistrust became the center of the Byzantine revival, the capital of the despotate of the Morea, from where the Greeks methodically pushed the Franks back to the west, taking city after city from them, until by the 15th century the entire peninsula had returned to Roman control. The reconquest took centuries, but it began with these 3 fortresses, obtained as ransom for a single prisoner. Thus, the once formidable principality of Achaea tragically transformed from a mortal enemy of Nicaea into a secondary weakened power on the sidelines of history. It was irrevocably forced to switch to the strategic defense of its shrinking possessions, and could never again seriously threaten the restored, powerful Byzantine Empire of the Palaiologos with offensive actions. Pelagonia broke the backbone of Latin Greece. After it, the Franks only retreated and lost land, unable to recover from the demographic and material losses of the battle and the loss of their best knights, whose death or capture left the principality without a military elite for a generation to come. The victory also significantly strengthened the personal position of the ambitious Michael VIII within the Nicaean Empire among the elite. His authority as a successful ruler, strategist, and brilliant commander grew many times over in the eyes of his subjects and the army. Politically, this allowed him to finally consolidate his usurped power against the legitimate Lascaris dynasty and prepare for the final historic assault on Constantinople without internal opposition. Victors are not judged. Pelagonia's success silenced Palaeologus' critics, who accused him of usurping the throne from the young John IV Lascaris. Because the results spoke for themselves, the empire expanded and triumphed under his leadership, and this justified any methods of coming to power in the eyes of pragmatic Romans who valued strength over legitimacy. In the fateful July of 1261, a small reconnaissance detachment of the Nicaean commander Caesar Alexius Strategopoulos, sent on a routine reconnaissance of the capital's surroundings, accidentally discovered that Constantinople was virtually defenseless and unguarded, a stroke of luck. The emperor's Latin garrison and the powerful Venetian fleet had gone on a plundering expedition to the island of Nicaea, leaving the capital almost empty. Seizing this incredible opportunity, Strategopoulos decisively entered the city at night through a secret passage opened by Greek traitors. There was almost no resistance, a few hundred soldiers against a sleeping city, and by dawn, the banners of Nicaea were flying over the walls, shocking the world. The impossible had become reality without a storming or siege. The Latin emperor usurper Baldwin II Courtenay fled the palace in disgrace without a fight on a Venetian ship, abandoning his crown and treasury. The city, which had been lost in disaster almost 57 years earlier in 1204, was triumphantly returned to its rightful Roman owners. We can see that the Battle of Pelagonia was not just a battle, but a brilliant special operation. John Palaiologos and his brother, Emperor Michael VIII, used not so much military force as a deep understanding of their opponent's weaknesses. They turned a powerful enemy alliance into an instrument of self-destruction. This story is a vivid example of the Byzantine approach to war, where diplomacy, intrigue, and psychology were valued no less than courage on the battlefield. Instead of crushing the enemy in a frontal attack, they forced it to collapse from within. It was a victory of intellect over brute force. The legacy of Pelagonia is enormous. This battle directly led to the restoration of the Byzantine Empire and changed the political map of the Balkans for centuries to come. It proved that even in the most desperate situations, the right strategy can bring tremendous success. Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.